Hello everybody, welcome to the Stillness in the Storm show. I'm your host, Justin Deschamps, and I'm joined by
Julian Robles.
And today is Wednesday, August 12th, 2015, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for this show is entitled Insider Predictions, Propaganda, and Money. And we're going to discuss some predictions coming for this fall, the use of propaganda to change values and beliefs, where money comes from, and where money comes from. We'll also discuss Fulford's most recent update from the 11th and some of the foretold events by himself and various insiders. But before we do that, we're going to cover some brief announcements. And just to let everybody know, our show is now a bi-monthly radio show. So you can actually, to plot out the shows, you can just take today and then just move forward 2 weeks. And the next show is actually going to be on August 26th, 2015 at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So in 2 weeks from today. The call-in number to listen, but also raise questions, so you can actually call in to enter the discussion at any time. And we'll actually have about a half hour or potentially longer or shorter at the end of the show. That number is 646-478-3085. And if you actually want to join in the conversation, just press 1 to let us know. I just want to give a shout out to Sierra Neblina, and you're listening to us on Galactic U Radio. Galactic U Radio has several shows throughout the throughout the week, and you can always go to Blog Talk Radio /Sierra_Neblina. Now, we actually have a blog post to follow along with us for this show. So if you're listening via Blog Talk Radio, you just got to go into the show description and click on the link. You can also, if you're listening to us live, you can go to the blog, and it should be either the first or second post. And if you're listening via YouTube, you can just look in the YouTube description, and that's where the link for today's show will be. So we're just going to discuss a couple brief announcements.
Shall I go over the announcements?
Surely.
Okay, so a few weeks ago we went to the Opal Northeast Regional Interface. That was on August 1st. We had a really good time. That was the second time that we went. Last time it was a much more extended adventure because we actually went to two different places, two different locations. But this time we went straight there, and you'll see in the blog post we linked the Opal Northeast Regional Interface blog post. If you click on that, you can see some photos from our trip. Excuse me. You can see some photos from our trip there. And you can also see photos of the farmhouse. And you can read more about what happened that day and what we did. In case you ever want to come out and go to the Opal Northeast Regional Interface, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some more events coming up. I know, if I remember correctly, I think they said there's at least one more coming up, so be on the lookout. I'm sure that we'll post about it. And we also wanted to remind everyone that in 1 week, on August 19th, the Mount Shasta Summer Conference will begin. If you haven't purchased your ticket and you are looking to purchase your ticket, you can do so by clicking on our ad / link on the cover of our blog at stillnessinthestorm.com or citro.blogspot.com. You'll see that We have the Mount Shasta Summer Conference Interplanetary Cultural Exchange, August 19th through 23rd, 2015. Banner at the top. You can click on that. It takes you directly to Promise Revealed, and from there you can purchase tickets. And we will, that's only until the 19th of this month, and at that point we'll probably have something else going on. We also want to let everyone know that we have partnered with Gaim TV on helping spread awareness about the Cosmic Disclosure series with Corey Good and David Wilcock. You'll see that we do have 2 ads on the blog now for Cosmic Disclosure on the very bottom. There's one there, and on the right-hand side, you'll also see one there. Just like the Corey Good links, if you click through our links and sign up for Gaim TV, you will be also contributing to Stillness. Your monthly payment to Gaim TV will also be contributing to Stillness in the Storm. So it's kind of like a win-win.
Right, Corey also gets a small amount as well.
And we also just made arrangements to do summaries and analysis of the Cosmic Disclosure show. The first post in that series should be coming out later this week. And we still have an analysis of the Corey Good detractors being developed. This is an extensive effort, and we want to ensure it covers as many points of view as possible. Is there anything you wanted to say about that?
Just that I mentioned that we were working on it during the last week's show, a couple weeks ago. There's a lot of material to review. I know Julian and I have probably watched on 8 or 9 hours of videos, conferences. We just watched one recently with Harold Kreutzwelle and the AI Symposium by Conscious Consumer Network. So there's a lot of information to cover that's not even addressing the written content, and we want to do a really thorough breakdown of that information. So just be patient. When we've done all the appropriate work and the post is perfect, we will release it.
Excuse me. Alrighty, well, I think that's it for that. That is it for the announcements. That was all we have this time. So we can go ahead and get into what we were going to be talking about in today's show, which is we're going to start with the Benjamin Fulford update from yesterday, since it was a day late. We're going to go over a little bit of that. We're also going to go over some similar information, but from a different perspective, through the Globalist Jedi Watch from Ken. And we also want to talk about, as it's in the title, propaganda and money. So we're going to go a few things about that. And then we want to end the show with information on Cosmic Disclosure with Corey Good and David Wilcock, just briefly going over the last 2 episodes that have been released. Alright, so if you've never heard of Benjamin Fulford, there was a recent article written by The Mind Unleashed, or Lance Shaw, for The Mind Unleashed, titled The Whistleblower That Everyone Is Soon to Know. We also went ahead and posted that on our blog with added links and commentary. So if you just click on the link found in this blog post, the Whistleblower That Everyone Is Soon to Know, you can go ahead and read up on Benjamin Fulford. But basically, just to give a brief overview, he used to work for Forbes magazine. And let me see. He used to work for Forbes magazine. Let's see here. We're also, not only are we doing the show on Blog Talk, but we're also recording for YouTube. So I'm trying to get a screen to open up here. But it doesn't seem to be working. Okay.
Yeah, with that blog post is just entitled "The Whistleblower That Everyone Soon Knew." or they'll assume to know. And if you go to the blog, you can actually read a pretty good recap of what that is actually covered in some of this stuff. So, in this blog post, Lance gives a general intro for who Benjamin is. And, as some of the people in the awakening community encounter Ben, they have varying opinions. I know Julian and I found his information right after we started our wake up journey in 2010, and we've been following him off and on since then, reviewing his reports. And anybody who's been following him that long notices the inconsistencies in some of his data, and we addressed that a little bit in this blog post.
Yeah, not everything that he said, not everything that he reports or predicts ends up being 100% accurate. But there have been things that he has reported and predicted that have come to pass. So it's kind of, I don't know what the right word is, iffy, if you will, but it's very possible that he does release information that he's getting from insiders. It's just whether or not that information that the insider has is accurate. You don't exactly know every time.
Right.
But basically, he used to work for Forbes magazine. For the full story, go ahead and read that blog post. I don't have it memorized. I know that he left the Forbes magazine. He's now residing in Japan, and he's writing about the corruption that's taking place around the planet. And the story transferred to working with the White Dragon Society, which is a group of Asian families who have been and are working together for various agendas. That's the way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently now they're working to stop the Western cabal, I guess you could say. But let's go ahead and get into the Fulford update for August 11th, 2015. That was from supposed to be on Monday, but it ended up being on Tuesday. So this week, Benjamin Fulford talked about how banks are now stealing depositors' money, most likely using negative interest rates. They're literally not allowing them to take out money, but instead receiving a bank guarantee that funds will be there. So we've actually talked about this in a few other posts on the blog in the past about negative interest rates. And basically what he's saying is that the banks are not letting customers or people withdraw their money anymore. Not everybody, but some people are not able to actually take out their money, and they're being said that instead of having the money, you have a guarantee stating you have the money. It's kind of like having a promissory note of a promissory note.
Right. Just goes to show you how desperate these institutions are.
And so Ben said that the bank would not give him his money, but offered to tell other banks that they had money, which is basically what I was just saying. An IOU for an IOU.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes on. The U.S. military agencies are on the case, and criminal investigations are ongoing, according to Pentagon sources. However, the Pentagon sources say the Pentagon has been unable to bankrupt the United States of America Corporation and restore the Republic of the United States of America because of objections from the Chinese. And basically, China just doesn't want to lose out on their Federal Reserve notes that they've had. He says that they have about $3 trillion in outstanding, or $3 trillion in outstanding debt. That the Chinese have that debt on the Americans. And so the leadership of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff will be completely overhauled at the end of September. The incoming leadership group is ready to take serious action and start a major roundup of Khazarian gangsters in Washington, D.C., New York, and elsewhere. The Israeli military and intelligence community is preparing to take similar action in Israel, according to Mossad sources. So again, like we said earlier, you kind of sometimes you have to take what he says with a grain of salt and see, let time go on and see if it actually does come true, because he'll predict major things or major events and they don't always come to pass.
Right.
But he is another person who does talk about, the positive military, that there is a positive aspect to the government and the military, just as David Wilcock and Corey Good have spoken about.
Yeah, I think I'll just mention at this time that the reason we share Fulford's information is for many different reasons, but the key reason is that he's become one of the more popular spokesmen for the alternative news and the awakening community. So if we define the awakening community as those people who are at some level of awareness about the corruption and the illusion of modern society, and that it's actually run by a secret group of dark occultists or Illuminati or Cabal members, then at some point you've probably encountered Fulford's information. So the reason why this is important is for a few different things. Just like it's important to, or you can gain value and insight by reviewing propaganda from other sources like Fox News, PBS, mainstream media in general, it's the same type of idea with Fulford. Fulford's information seems to be of that type of quality in that he receives news items, he receives reports from various insiders. Apparently Zap used to be one of them, or somebody connected to Zap. And he just shares the information. So in this way, it seems like he's just a channel for the data. Now, where these insiders get their information is unclear, but considering how high up Fulford is in the alternative news, what I suspect is happening, and I think there's a strong amount of evidence to support that based on the veracity of his posts, is that he's providing information to the alternative media through Cabal channels, and that whatever information is making it through Fulford is being received for a specific reason. So it's just like when Fox News will say that Christians are dying, American Christians are dying in Islamic countries, and we need to do something about it. They're telling you this because it's a form of propaganda. They want you to develop a belief or have some value highlighted by receiving the information. Now, in Fulford's case, I don't necessarily think he's overtly a disinformation operative or that he's spouting propaganda, but he acts as a channel for this information from his sources, and there's been many times that the sources or the information he provides based on those sources is not accurate, and in some cases is totally off the wall. On the other hand, there's a lot of information that does seem to accurately represent reality. So with this perspective of what are they trying to tell us, in quotes, in mind, you can read his information and you can kind of gain some insights into the bigger picture. And that's one of the reasons we share his information.
Right. We'll never know when he's going to have something that's like a little kernel of truth.
Right.
So so in his recent update, basically, just to wrap that up, he's talking about that banks are now stealing depositor money. They're going into negative interest rates. We've seen this in I think it was the Philippines also, and Greece, if I'm not mistaken. I know we've done a few different blog posts on it. And as you can see, we did link negative interest rates are here, JP Morgan Private Banker, we can't make money anymore. That's the name of the blog post that's linked, which does talk about the negative interest rates. And then he was saying that the Chinese, they don't want to lose out on what they've invested in. And also mainly that there's going to be an overhaul at the end of September, and Fulford isn't the only person who is now talking about how something is going to be taking place in the month of September. And we're going to go more into that. But right now we're actually going to talk about some of the same kind of information, except from a different perspective, which is from the Globalist Agenda Watch. We've been posting the Globalist Agenda Watch for I don't even know how long now. It's been quite some time. And Globalist Agenda Watch 2015 is a series of posts written by Ken from the blog Redefining God. And there have been quite a few. I think we started, very early, near the first or second update, and now it's already to 60. Mm-hmm. And basically, Ken also follows alternative media news information, including Dave Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford, but he has a different perspective on what's going on. What he sees is that everything from Fulford and Wilcock, even Ron Paul, and anything coming out of the mainstream media is in some way being used as a new type of control system, or it's still being used to further the New World Order agenda. And he's got some good points, in my opinion. He talks about some of the books that the Rockefellers wrote, where it does talk about forming the New World Order, what it would take, what role America would play in the future.
Right.
But let's just read a little bit of what he had to say, basically. So,
when did this post come out?
This was August 3rd. And it's called Global Agenda Watch 2015, Update 64, Looking Ahead to the Fall Government Fiasco. Basically, he's also talking about October, September timeframe. The U.S. federal government can stay below its legal limit on borrowing until at least late October, and likely do so a little longer than that, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew said on Wednesday. Late October, and a little longer than that, would put the debt limit very close to the November 15-16 G20 summit. So, as we cast our gaze upon the U.S. budget/debt limit situation, there are three questions that must be asked. 1. Will the Congress pass a budget for fiscal year 2016 before October 1st? Not likely. According to this article about the federal budget from the Fiscal Times, House Speaker John Boehner is already talking about the necessity of passing a continuing resolution to keep the government funded past September 30th. Question number 2, will Congress pass a continuing resolution to avoid a government shutdown? And he responds he linked an article, How Planned Parenthood Could Shut Down the Government. A shutdown over defunding the group places the federal government in the crosshairs of partisan shutdown fight this fall. So again, if it hasn't been made clear by what he's talking about, they're talking about another government shutdown that's supposed to take place this fall.
Yeah, and this kind of thing happens every year, it seems like. I know since we started paying attention to these events at around 2010, definitely 2011, Fulford and various people, depending on what it is, it could be Comet Elenin, it could be a government shutdown, it could be a mass arrest scenario. There's almost always something on the horizon, that like a carrot that seems to be dangling in front of our faces. Just wait until this. In 2012, it was motu proprio issued by the Pope. And that doesn't mean that these things that are being discussed, these events, aren't necessarily important. But what tends to happen is somebody will make a statement, like I'll use motu proprio as an example. Motu proprio was a statement made by the Pope, essentially saying that he's going to remove the limits of liability that various figures under the Roman Sharia law have protecting them. So what that means is potentially anybody under the legal system that's acting as a public servant could be held liable for their actions. And considering the Pope is known, or the Pope and Vatican are known for intelligence gathering on these political figures, specifically for the purpose of manipulating them using blackmail tactics, anybody in the know can read that document and say there definitely is something big being suggested. So what ended up happening is a lot of people, I guess in hindsight, I'll say, they misinterpreted what that statement meant, and they thought that massive global changes in the way of mass arrests, the complete ending of the cabal, the total cessation of the Federal Reserve, up into including Golden Age type scenarios, were all being heralded by this motu proprio announcement. And what ended up happening is nothing of the sort. Really, there wasn't anything that happened in a grand scale. And most people don't even acknowledge the motu proprio as even having any validity at all. So ultimately what we have is a situation where there's a lot of people looking for some indication of hope. Somewhere they can put their hat and say, well, you know, things aren't really as bad as it seems. There's good things coming on the horizon. And that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't. However, what we need to be careful of and discerning is not placing all our eggs in one basket, or not only focusing on what we think is going to happen. What our interpretation of what these events are may be accurate, but historically speaking, the vast majority of these interpretations for these fall-type events that have happened in the past 4 years have never come to fruition. So what is going to happen this fall? There's a whole bunch of different things that we're going to get into. And we actually have a blog post coming with even more detail on that. But what I really want to emphasize is that don't develop in your own mind an understanding of what these events are, like this government shutdown, and think that this is going to be the beginning of some mass change on the planet. It certainly could be, but keep an open mind about the possibility that it's not. Because in keeping your mind open, you won't be let down later. Your expectations won't hold you down. And then what ends up happening if these predictions don't come to fruition, a lot like what happened in the 2012 Ascension, December 21st, 2012, Ascension type discussion or scenario. A lot of people were looking forward to some massive energetic event. It didn't happen because they didn't really understand what that event was. Now it's like a throw the baby out with the bathwater type reaction. So now anything that has to do with anything related to energetics is all hogwash. So by keeping an open mind and not placing all our eggs in one basket, we limit the amount of expectations that we place on these events. We're actually able to discern what they really are because we're actually looking for the truth. We haven't decided already. And we stave off any disappointment and disempowerment that happens if things don't happen or things don't transpire the way we think that they're going to happen. Just wanted to mention that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well stated. Exactly. There's definitely been a pattern with these kinds of announcements, and are we going to see a mass arrest, or are we going to be taken up to the planet, to the Neptune ship? So there's been a lot, and it's not just the past 10 years. Even before then, there was all kinds of predictions that have been given that have not come to pass. And I think that's definitely something to take into account, to look at. It's not to say that you can't trust anything. It's just that you have to use discernment, and like Justin said, not put all your eggs in one basket. The internet is full of information. It has accurate information. It has inaccurate information. It's got kittens. It's got all kinds of things on it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that because you read it on the internet or because somebody you're following read it on the internet, it's 100% accurate.
Right.
Because not everything is 100% accurate on the internet, for sure. Okay, so we kind of had some posts here that we wanted to clump together. They all kind of have a similar kind of story behind them. This next blog post called "Monarchies Account for 40% of the Global Debt" by Standard and Poor's. This was an article that was recently released, and it's just detailing the debt, the world debt. If you're looking at the blog post, there's a pie chart that shows the debt owed by royal states. Let me see if I can take a look at this. Okay. So, monarchies headed by Queen Elizabeth II is 8.2. Absolute monarchies is 0.4%. Japan is 25.4%. That's interesting. Japan, that would be linked directly to the White Dragon Society.
Mm-hmm.
Other constitutional monarchies, 5.9%. So there you go. Wow, I didn't realize that Japan was such a
huge portion.
Yeah, such a huge portion there. It's interesting. And I wonder how closely the monarchies are actually tied to each other.
Right. I mean, if we go back all the way, I'll cite Financial Tyranny by David Wilcock, or we can even talk about Operation Golden Lily. The creation of the Bank of International Settlements was directly a result of a pretty intense campaign to coerce the sovereign treasures and holdings. And when I say sovereign, I mean not in a total or absolute sense, but I mean in a more commercial sense, where we have royal families who are sovereign in that they are not ruled by anybody else, and they've acquired a massive amount of wealth over the millennia. And in Operation Golden Lily, the Federal Reserve, basically, using the Japanese as well as several other organizations, went through and basically stole all this material wealth away from these sovereign families and sequestered in the Bank of International Settlements and issued them bonds. And essentially what we've had since then is an IOU system. So what we're kind of looking at with these figures, when we talk about global debt, at this point we're talking about an IOU, and this debt is the stuff that they pin on the backs of the citizenry. So what it goes to show you is that there's a huge redistribution of wealth that's happened over the past 100 years. And there's a huge disproportion of wealth. It's to the point where you have $1,000, that's one thing.
Well, here, it says right here in the article,
Go ahead, yeah.
A recent report from Standard & Poor's shows that 40% of global sovereign debt belongs to monarchies. However, only 39 out of 129 countries have a king or queen as a head of state. So 39 out of 129 countries is making up 40% of the global sovereign debt.
Right. Which is a huge amount.
It is.
So just generally speaking, this, and we'll probably get into this when we talk about the money aspect, but this is a huge amount of money, and when wealth gets aggregated, or hoarded is a better word to use, into the hands of one person, it literally starts to have detrimental effects on the livelihood of everybody else. And I guess I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll get into it later.
Well, you did do a little breakdown at the beginning of this as well.
Right. You want to read a little passage?
No, I was just saying that you can read more about what you were just talking about in the blog post, Monarchies Account for 40% of global debt, because you did write it.
Right.
Part of that in there.
Mm-hmm.
So the next blog post that we released earlier this week was where does money come from? The fraud of the bank credit. Do you own a home, a car? Do you have a credit card or a student loan? You want to go ahead and talk about that, Justin?
Sure. Well, this is a post from Stopping the Pirates, or Stop the Pirates. And this blog has a lot of great information. In particular, this information is dealing with is dealing with where money comes from. And I'll just read this little intro here. The question of where money comes from and why we need it is almost never asked. Yet in our modern world, almost everyone agrees that one must do something to make it. We must earn a living. As we described in the below article on the Money Masters, when a people loses touch with reality, when they blindly accept illusion as unquestioned fact, then money is needed to help manage the incompetent masses. Almost everyone on earth has to deal with this unnatural creation known as money. We train for 20 years in educational institutions, ostensibly so we can compete with others who need money too. We pollute the environment, pillage other nations, force those who are in prison to work for a small pittance, so that corporations can make millions, all in the name of making a buck. But what if we were being duped? What if the money we slave away our lives to earn was created by us in the first place? Well, get ready to have your minds blown, because it's exactly how the financial system works. So, and I'll just kind of stop it there. I'll go into a little bit more. But essentially what this blog post is detailing is the process of creating money. And I'll just give a brief description of that now. Money as we know it and use it today is an IOU. It's a negotiable instrument. It's you can think of it as a promissory note. Now the UCC defines negotiable instruments as any document or promise to pay, it doesn't have to actually be written, that where one person pledges some item of value, something, whether it's their labor or whatnot, to somebody else. That document in and of itself, this is called a negotiable instrument. So the money that we have in our wallets, these are Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes are promises to pay. They're promises to pay by the people, or in this case, the United States of America Corporation, who by de facto rulership represents the people, who is us. So by extension, we are promising to pay back the Federal Reserve. And that's what a Federal Reserve note actually is. Okay? It's an IOU. So, in the way that this currency or money is defined in the UCC, anything that falls within that very loose description is considered legal tender of money. So even if you write, I will pay my friend John $20 in 10 days, on the back of, a leaf, or you write it on the back of your hand, or you just tell it to your friend, now that in and of itself is a negotiable instrument, or it's a debt, and that has a value. And this value is the fact that you are going to do something in the future. So, in relation to us and what value we're talking about, well, in 1933, the United States went bankrupt, and before that time we had gold and silver-backed currency. They removed that backing because we weren't able to make our payments on the previous bankruptcy, and as a result, anytime there's a default on a bankruptcy, the party that has defaulted, which is the American people in this case, they have to pledge something else. So you can't just keep making IOUs. You usually pledge whatever you pledged before, you maybe even renegotiate that, and then you pledge something else. So in this case, in 1933, we pledged the blood, sweat, and labor of the American people into posterity. And what that essentially means is that as soon as an American citizen is born, they have a price tag of debt tied to them. They have to work under obligation under this fallacious system. So where does money come into the equation then? Well, because of this system, and the use of fractional reserve banking, money is actually created when we make promises to pay. And this happens on a regular basis within the financial system anytime we make an application for credit, bank credit. So when you apply to a credit card, when you apply for a student loan, when you apply for a car loan, or basically any amount of credit, that statement, that application saying that you want XYZ amount of money and that you're going to pay it back over XYZ period of time, that is a negotiable instrument. It is exactly the same or equivalent to the Federal Reserve notes that you may or may not have in your pocket right now. So, what's insidious about this program is that the financial system, doesn't actually disclose this to us. So this is essentially how the order of events goes. We walk into our local bank and we want to get a loan for a car, let's say. We fill out the application, we say we want it $10,000, and we hand this signed application with our signature over to the banker. Now, we're led to believe that the banker goes and works tirelessly to get our loan approved, and they have to shuffle money from the main central account to our account, and when that money is received, we think, okay, well, we've gotten our loan, and now we have to make good on this debt and honor our word by working and paying back the loan over certain terms. So, in and of itself, most people are trying to do quote-unquote the right thing based on the information they have available to work with. But the truth is that no money was actually lent to you. The bank that you walked into didn't actually transfer any funds from the central branch to your bank account. What actually happened is they took your loan application, that is a promise to pay, it's a promissory note, it has a value for the amount in this example that we just used of $10,000, because that's the loan amount you wanted. You agreed to pay back $10,000. So this is a promise to pay. So what the bank actually does, your little local bank, is they go to the Federal Reserve and they say, please convert this money that we just received from us into Federal Reserve notes. That bank actually receives the Federal Reserve notes as a transfer, and then they transfer those Federal Reserve notes or that bank credit to our bank account. And we actually think that we've had money lent to us, but in reality, and this is an exaggeration, this isn't some obtuse legal description that I would pull out of the legal paperwork. This is what actually literally happens. What literally happens is our own value, which is our labor and energy that we're promising to pledge forth, is converted into Federal Reserve notes, and then deceptively they say they're lending us that money back, and they have to charge us interest. Now, normally the application of interest happens because there's a risk on the bank part. The bank has some risk because they're lending us money, and what happens if we don't pay it back? Well, as I just described to you, there was no risk. There is no risk because that bank doesn't actually lend you anything as far as their value is concerned. It's not that they had $10,000 before we walked in, and now as we leave, they don't have $10,000 in their coffers. The money was literally created by us signing our name on the application. And in the process, they attempt and they fallaciously, insidiously charge us interest for this money that was ours to begin with. And this is where the usury comes in, because this is really their whole goal. The whole goal of this system isn't to make more money on their part. The banks can create money through this system. So the real goal is for us to use our own energy, our creative and physical energy, to do things in the system. And this is where money actually comes from. The vast, vast majority of all quote-unquote money, whether or not that's electronic bank credit or those Federal Reserve notes, is actually promises to pay. So what happens when this $10,000 is created? Well, you go to your local used car dealership and you buy a car. Well, now that $10,000 is deposited as legal tender or currency into the car dealership's bank account. And now he has money to go spend, but what happens is that the Federal Reserve, the fractional reserve system, then takes that amount of money and they go and lend out more money. And really I didn't describe this earlier, I apologize, the fractional reserve aspect is how much money does a bank account or a bank actually have to need on the books or the ledger in order to lend more money. And that's what's called fractional. So they only need a fraction of what they have in bank accounts to then lend out as new credit. Well, as I just described and where the money actually comes from, that in and of itself is fallacious because there was no money to begin with in these bank accounts. So literally what the equivalent is it's like you go to your friend who says that they're going to lend you some money because you're such a nice guy. And what they actually do is they break into your house without you knowing, they steal your money, and then they come and lend that to you and deceive you into thinking that you have to go work your butt off to go pay back a loan, when in fact the money was yours to begin with. So this is essentially what this whole article is talking about. And what I spend more time talking about, which I'll go into briefly now, is the reason why this whole system is even works. If anybody knew where money was created, if people really knew where money came from, there would be a huge level of righteous indignation that would sweep through the masses. So, how is it that this system can actually continue to maintain itself without people becoming very upset? Well, they don't know. What people don't know can't hurt them. That's how the old saying goes. And in this case, the vast majority of people are ignorant. Almost everybody agrees that we need money. Almost everybody agrees that you need to go do something to earn a living. But when you ask people, well, where does money come from and why do we even need it, almost nobody can actually give you the answer. So what essentially money is, and this Mark Passio describes this I think perfectly well, money is the most successful worldwide religion ever. And it's a dogmatic religion because people believe unquestionably that money is needed, yet they have almost no personal knowledge to speak of as far as where it comes from, why we need it, and where it originated in the first place. Now, when a population forgets about the abundance that's inherent in life itself, in nature, and we've talked about this before, if you look at the family unit, most families, especially the mother and father, they're doing things for their children based on goodwill or faith. So it's like a pay it forward kind of a system. And the pay it forward system is really the organic, natural system that facilitates trade, creation, and commerce. That's the real thing that's backing everything. The money is an intermediary that was created to manipulate people. And the reason it's so successful is that when people lose touch with this natural system of abundance, this pay-it-forward system, when they forget that everybody collectively contributes to the welfare and well-being of everybody else on the planet, when they forget that fundamental truth, now we need money to step in and facilitate trade and commerce. And that's essentially what has happened. And this program, or this propaganda scheme of money, has been operating on the planet for thousands of years. The modern money system as we know it is almost exactly like what the Sumerians used, 4,000 BC, almost 6,000 years ago. And I'd argue that it goes even further back beyond that. So what I'm really trying to highlight is that what has been called a Babylonian money magic system, and where it becomes money magic is it's a tool of propaganda against the masses. We think that we need money in order to facilitate trade and commerce. And what essentially has happened is money has become one of the best mind control tactics ever. If you go to someone and you say, I want you to spend 40 hours of your week working to help benefit humanity and other people, most people will laugh at you and say that you're crazy. I'll never do that. But if you offer them some amount of money, then you can get people to do almost anything. You can get people to even go against their own family, to even mutilate their own body. I mean, the amount of things that you can do to based on paying somebody money is just off. It's off the chain, to use the modern vernacular. So I really wanted to highlight that because the key solution to all of this, which I just try to emphasize in these posts about money, is we must gain knowledge. And we must share this knowledge with as many people as we know. So really, essentially, everybody's been under a heavy amount of mind control, a heavy amount of propaganda, and their beliefs and values have been heavily influenced for thousands of years. And the only way to really affect change, the only way to move out of this paradigm is to start telling the truth to people on a massive scale. And eventually we'll get to the point where we can begin to trade using this goodwill system again. And a lot of communities have started to do that already. So we just need to take this idea and it needs to really go viral. So I'll go ahead and end my rant there. Thank you.
Perfect. I never have any great comebacks to your rant, so I'm just going to go to the next thing. Which is how and why the money masters took control. This is a blog post about a documentary. And
Yeah, I'll take it for you.
go ahead.
Yes.
Because it's just basically just goes on with what you were just saying. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So go ahead. Finish it up.
So yeah, essentially, this just leads into what I was just saying. That The Money Masters is a documentary produced by Bill Still. It's a quote-unquote epic documentary. It's, I believe it's several hours actually long. And it looks like the video inside the blog post has been taken down. I apologize. We'll go make every effort to try to find another version of the video and get it listed.
Yeah, this will be probably the third or fourth time that we've had to change the video because every now and then it gets taken down, or we may just have to put up the official one, which is from Bill Still. I think you may have to pay like a few dollars to watch it, but
right.
Either way, we can still talk about what it goes over.
Certainly. Yeah, he recently switched to doing rentals. I mean, part of me wants to go on this rant about intellectual property right now, but I'll hold off on that for the time being.
Well, it's the battle between intellectual property rights and self-sustaining, being self-sustainable, monetarily speaking, in the program of money that we're talking about right now.
Exactly. And, I forget, I'm just going to go right into it because I think this is really important, That we're in an information war, to use Hillary Clinton's line. And the information war it's really split up into two categories. You're either working for the cabal and you're limiting the proliferation of information, or you're working for freedom and truth and you're trying to spread information as much as possible. Now, the cabal, the dark occultists, the Illuminati, our would-be masters, our partners in contrast, whatever name you want to give to them, their tool, their technique for manipulating people into their plans and efforts is all about pushing ignorance. Propaganda only works because you have an ignorant population. And when I say ignorance, I'm not using it as an insult, I'm just simply saying it's the lack of knowledge.
Ignorance, as my pastor would say, ignoring things.
Ignorance. And then,
the real things.
Right. And to take it even a step further, when you have the ability to access information and you choose not to gain familiarity on something, now you're ignoring it. Now you're definitely in ignorance. So, for me, this really strikes a chord because Julian and I realized early on in our awakening experience that sharing information was absolutely crucial to affecting real change. And that the whole awakening, the phase of the awakening that we're in right now is a debriefing. Those who have information are supposed, or those who have information can share it with others. I won't put any judgment calls on it. I'll just say they can share it. And in the process of sharing information, you offer empowerment to other people. Well, this is butted up against a very real situation in our world, which goes right along with the topic of discussion here for the money masters, which is we have to earn a living. In our world right now, the population of the planet is so mind-controlled, so heavily dependent and hopelessly ensconced in this belief that money is some magical tool of absolute power, that we literally forget about everything else to a certain extent to focus only on generating money as a way to sustain ourselves. And some people have broken into other ways of doing that. Even, I would argue that there's a lot of people that are entertaining these alternative ways to manage society away from the control and manipulation of money. But eventually, you're going to run up into a problem. You want to actually get something from somebody, or you want to work with somebody, and the only thing they want to receive as compensation is money. And really, this is the grander social problem that is plaguing humanity right now. Is you got these little pops, like popcorn in the microwave. People are waking up, realizing that money is a tool of manipulation, that there's a huge amount of artificial debt and scarcity attached to it, and they want to free themselves from it. But we can't be islands of freedom and sovereignty in a world of piracy, in a sea of piracy. So what ends up happening is we're forced to still deal with the system. And in the alternative media community, this is a huge problem. I'm just going to say it unequivocally. This is a major problem. And this is something that really strikes a chord for me, because I see a lot of people who are sharing information or wanting to share information, but they find that they're meeting very real challenges in their lives, ourselves included. Julian and I aren't rich people.
By any means. We have a lot of help and assistance from people in order to live our lives.
Right. And, the work that goes into the blog and the amount of energy that it takes to research and write these posts and contemplate and really discern the information.
And create the images and create outlines for radio shows and curriculums for series like the Franklin Lodge for the Awakening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a full-time job for not just one, but for the both of us. Not to mention the help that we have from our network, whether it be on Facebook or other social sites.
Right, exactly. So it takes a lot of energy to produce this content. And I kind of lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
That's okay. Oh, so let me just recap, because I kind of went off on a tangent. I apologize, everybody, for my meandering here. So essentially what we have is we acknowledge that sharing information is fundamental to affecting real change. The reason why the world is the way it is, in a general sense, big blanket statement, is because a lot of people don't know what the heck is going on. Most people have almost no knowledge of what's really going on and how these things in our lives actually work. We have a lot of faith that they're for good reasons. We have a lot of blind belief in dogma that this is needed and that is needed, and that there's no other way to do things outside of fossil fuels, and that we have to put ourselves in debt. The list goes on. So because of this lack of knowledge, the only way to affect any real change is to share this information. And for people like us and many other people who are waking up, they realize that they have to get the word out. But now there's a problem. How do you get the word out and still survive? How do you still live on a daily basis? Or how do you earn a living? And what most people, or a lot of people in the alternative media do, is they decide that they're going to use intellectual ownership as a way to generate income. Well, this comes at a heavy price, because the price of intellectual ownership, of copyright, of patents, of trademarks,
And the limiting of information in general is the price for that is essentially what I just said. It limits the information from getting disseminated, from being shared. And in this instance, we shared a video entitled "The Money Masters," but the Money Masters video was actually taken down because the person who originally hosted it, and I have nothing against Bill Still. I think he's a fantastic researcher. He did amazing work, and I'm not condemning the man. I am condemning the idea. And what I'm saying is that the use of intellectual property to gain income for oneself so that you can continue to work has a huge cost of limiting the proliferation of information. So
It has a way of limiting what?
the proliferation of information, the distribution of information, getting the word out. Let me use a simple analogy or example. Where everybody's living in a town, there's a town well, right? And somebody late at night, they're going to get some water from the well, and before they actually get to the mouth of the well, they see this guy dumping tons of cyanide into the town well. It's going to poison the town people. Well, clearly the best way to prevent the townspeople from being poisoned is to share this information as far and wide as possible. But this guy decides, you know what? Well, I could do that, but I need to get paid for my services. I shouldn't just do this for free. I want to get money for this. So what he decides to do is he decides to put out a bulletin in the town square saying there's this very important information that everybody needs to know, but in order to get this information, you have to pay me $5. Well, before anybody gets the chance to come and receive this information, maybe one or two people actually decide they want to know and pay him $5. So they get the information, and they know that somebody's poisoned the well, and they're able to take the necessary steps to prevent themselves from being poisoned. But a lot of the people just don't pay the $5. And what ends up happening a week later? Well, most of the townspeople end up dying because they drink the poison water. So the point I'm trying to get at with this fable or parable is that this person wanted to get they wanted to receive currency, or they wanted to receive money for sharing this information, and because of this act, they actually were complicit in causing the deaths of a lot of the townspeople. And really, this problem, I'm going to just say it is a problem. This problem plagues a huge amount of the alternative media. There's so many people who are producing amazing content and producing high quality, high dense information that can be used to awaken the minds of a lot of people. But because they don't have enough to survive in and of themselves, they resort to intellectual property. They resort to limiting information, using various methods so that people have to pay in order to get the information. And as a result, what ends up happening? Not a lot of people end up seeing the information.
That can also cause there to be an attachment to the information from the person who actually creates it or discovers it. Kind of like the secrets in plain sight. Secrets in plain sight. Is that the website? secretsinplainsight.com or something like that?
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a YouTube series similar to like the Money Masters, except it talks about different correlations between ancient sites, current architecture in Washington, D.C., London, the Vatican. Really interesting information. And he goes through and he creates a lot of YouTube videos using Google Earth. And so, but the information is copyrighted. So Google Earth, being a public use tool, as you could say, the map is there, the sites are there. He didn't create the sites. He didn't make the math. He didn't build the structures. You know what I mean? You see what I'm getting at? It's that what is it that you're paying for? You know, I mean, I understand, and it's a tricky line because, like you said, we have to go through the same. We go through the same thing. Uh, excuse me, I have a little bit of chest pain.
No problem.
So, but I don't want to lose track of my thoughts. So what I was saying is that we all have to earn a living. In the society that we live in, we all have to earn a living, and there's no way to do your passion or do what you love without being forced in a way to do something you don't really want to do. Because a lot of times, and this doesn't go for everything, but a lot of passions don't pay what I guess you would say a living wage, as it is described now. And I think that this is a problem, as a whole, that we have as a mass of people in society. Very similar to the concept of abortion, for instance. There's a lot of people, it's a very controversial subject. The woman should have the right to make the choice whether or not she has to keep the child or not. On the other hand, the child is a living being and the woman has no right to take that child's life away. But really what we're talking about is not about the life. It's what we're really talking about is the capability for this person to raise this child.
Right.
That's where the problem arises from, because they can't afford to raise the child, or they're too young to raise the child, or they're too old to raise the child, something like that. So they have no support in order to raise the child.
Right.
You see what it is that I'm getting at with that?
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, essentially, and this goes right back to what we were talking about before with money, is we're talking about a support network. In a family setting, a family can take care of the whole. It's a holistic system. So if one person, is disabled, or they have a passion that they have a passion that isn't marketable, then they could potentially rely on the resources of the family. And if this family is well-to-do, then this happens quite a lot. There's many people who end up earning a lot of money, and when they've earned a certain volume of currency, now they're able to do things that normal people just couldn't do, like spend years learning how to paint but not actually be a well-paid artist, or write plays, or just do research into I mean, the list of potentialities is unending. But really what we're getting at is that who is going to have your back, or who's going to support you as you go through this process. And what has happened over thousands of years is we had one human family where we all took care of each other. So in that setting, if you can imagine a woman becomes pregnant and she doesn't want to necessarily raise her child, well, no problem. You've got the rest of the human population that's going to help you raise your child. And quite frankly, I don't really think that there's anything wrong with that. And I would argue that children that are raised in a larger community setting are much more capable than children that are forced under another type of situation. And when we
Solitary.
Right, a single mother kind of a situation. Not to place any judgment on people. It's the concepts, it's the ideas that in our present day and age, if a woman becomes pregnant, it's totally her responsibility, as if nobody else on the planet Earth exists to help this person out, or anybody out for that matter. And this has kind of gone off on a tangent from what we originally talked about. But what I really wanted to emphasize with this whole rant about intellectual ownership is that a lot of people in the alternative media community, a lot of awake people, realize that information proliferation and dissemination is needed, yet they're crippled by needing to earn a living. And I would argue the vast majority of people in the alternative media community who are pushing this awakening type of information are in that type of form, are in that situation. If they could, they'd quit their jobs, they'd stop doing everything they're doing just to do the work within reason. But a lot of people feel like their hands are tied. And Julian and I, when we were going through the ethical discussion of, well, how were we going to distribute information? Were we going to give the information away and let people know that it takes energy and time to produce it, and if they want to contribute and ensure that that information flow continues, they can contribute to us, or do we want to try to force people to pay for our information? We decided to go with the pay it forward, or even what Amanda Palmer's approach is. Amanda Palmer just searched for I think it's The Art of Asking.
Correct.
And that's a great video. So really this is a kind of a new paradigm way of thinking. But what it does is it encourages networking, it encourages community, and it encourages us to stop focusing on separation and start working together. And if we can really do this, if we can develop even the most modest support network in our lives, the level of freedom that it affords us is monumental. I mean, if you could just find 10 or 15 people in a 10-mile radius that all wanted to help support food and water, getting food and water, whether it be growing it, going to a community space, maybe somebody has a large property that they would be willing to open up for a community farming project. But even if you just did that one aspect of your life, it would open up a huge amount of income and money to spend on other things. And essentially I think that's what we need to do looking forward, is we need to take these systems that have become heavily centralized, like food distribution, power generation, healthcare, education, everything you can think of, and we need to take them back and remove that monetary element from it and bring it back to the community of holistic and sovereign individuals that we can be. Which goes right into what the money masters have been doing, and this goes into the whole propaganda. So what propaganda essentially is a tool for manipulating the consciousness of people.
Right, and I just wanted to say that this is the next blog post that we wanted to go over, which is propaganda. Do you know you're soaking in it? Public relations and propaganda are all forms of mass mind control. And so you want to go ahead with what you were saying there?
Yeah, sure. Well, propaganda, I guess I'll give a brief little history. In this link for this post here, we have another link called History of Mass Mind Control, The Century of Self. And this is an excellent video series. It's 4 episodes. This is another one we have to go in and constantly make sure that it's updated. So at any time, just generally, if you're in a blog post that has videos and they're not working, or they've been taken down, just send us an email at sitsshow@gmail.com and let us know so we can try to find a replacement. But what this documentary series goes into is essentially the past 100 to 150 years of propaganda and mass mind control on the planet. And at the turn of the 20th century, Freudian psychology was becoming very popular, and Freud's nephew, I believe, Edward Bernays, who was an Austrian-American psychologist and philosopher, developed several systems for essentially manipulating the beliefs and values of people, and that's what propaganda is all about. Propaganda is about presenting you with information, whether it's in the form of a story, whether it's an advertisement. It could come in many different forms, but the general overarching goal for all propaganda is to manipulate your beliefs, so what you think is true, and your values, what you actually place value on, what you think is important in your life. And the reason why that is such an effective tool is because if you can manipulate people's beliefs, what you think is reality, then you can manipulate what people think is important, and now you can manipulate them to do things for you. And this tool that he developed, he called it propaganda. And one of the other names for this, propaganda was a German name for it, that this was developed in the 20s and 30s. On the American side, we call it public relations. These are two names for the same thing. It's all about manipulating consciousness. And it does it using subliminal or deceptive means. So, essentially what propaganda has done, not just in the past 100 years, but over the past, I would argue, modern history, reaching back to the Sumerian times and well before, is they've slowly distorted our perception of reality and what we hold valuable, what we find valuable in our own lives, to the point where if you just look out into the world, you can see the effects of this. To use a very simple statement, I think it was Louise Hay that said this, that you've got to remember that people are always doing the best that they can do with what they have to work with. And what that means is that anything anybody does is almost always a reflection of what their beliefs are and what they think is important. So let's just take the food industry as an example. Food is by medicine, really. Food is a tool to heal your body, to gain knowledge, to send information about your environment to your body so that you can have proper health and function. But we've been slowly conditioned to think over thousands of years that food is purely for pleasure. And now, with that belief, with that worldview firmly entrenched in people's minds, they go and they make a lot of trouble for themselves. They eat food that has no nutritional value whatsoever, and that's arguably designed to destroy health. So propaganda is a huge tool for manipulating consciousness, and it's all founded on ignorance. You can't manipulate somebody's perception if they're a truth seeker and they're actively trying to understand the information they're receiving. So what you've got, usually what ends up happening is when people come into the world, they're traumatized almost immediately. And they enter various systems of trauma. So why is trauma important? Well, trauma is important because what trauma essentially is people turning away from their experience or stopping the acquisition of more knowledge and data because the experience is so intense. So, for example, if you told people that most of the politicians and public figures in governments the world over are actually dark occultists who are practicing forms of Luciferianism that use drugs, prostitution, slavery, human trafficking, human sacrifice, and various other things, pedophilia, all sorts of horrors, these things are so intense that most people, when they hear them, they just shut down their thinking logical processes. And now this shutdown creates a huge emotional charge. And what usually, just like if you were to grab something hot in the stove, you pull your hand away and it's like you reject the experience. So this is why trauma is important, because it's instrumental in creating a mental construction of somebody or a modality of ignorance. So what trauma leads to is progressive levels of ignorance. And by the time I would argue, by the time they're entering school, they're already at a huge level of ignorance and trauma. Okay? So with that foundation firmly in place, now we can begin the propaganda campaign. And the propaganda campaign is all about pushing dogma, pushing beliefs and values. So they don't explain to you why these beliefs and values are important. They just tell you you need to. And if you don't believe these things, you must be abnormal. So if you don't believe that people need to earn a living, it's because you're some freeloading hippie liberal, basically, and you're a social outcast. And who wants to be social outcasts? Who are not social outcasts? Nobody. So Even just the potential of being labeled a social outcast creates an emotional reaction, which goes right into the trauma programming. So what do? We continue to peddle ignorance in our lives. We continue to turn away from the truth. And with this lack of knowledge firmly in place, now the cup or the crucible is ready to be filled with dogma and false knowledge. And that's exactly what the program has been for thousands of years. Okay? So this is what this other article that we were discussing is all about. It's essentially about what propaganda is, that we're swimming in it right now already. It's literally being basted on us in voluminous heaps. I'll actually just read this little paragraph from the post. It says, arguably the most successful propaganda campaign occurred in humanity's deep past, when we forgot how to create abundance in our own lives via innovation and personal generation. We forgot that wealth of real and immediate value comes from the creative acts of each one of us, who pool our resources and inventive power together for the collective good of all. As a result of forgetting about our interconnectedness, we felt like we didn't have enough. Because in a way, we don't. We forgot how to create the things we need, and we began hoarding the little we did have. Within this carefully sculpted reality of scarcity, an artificial replacement for personal work and innovation took root. Money.
That's it. We cycle back to the money.
Exactly, and that's where it comes right down to. I'll just read that little paragraph because I feel like it goes well with it. Why work hard to learn skills and develop knowledge if money is needed, or if you have money? This is the meme of our age, the overriding thought form which subtly works on the consciousness of all humanity. All made possible through consciousness manipulation technology, propaganda. And governments, royalty, and religions have been subtly shaping the values and beliefs of their people for generations. What can we do in the face of such a successful program of domination and control? Thankfully, there is an immunization one can take that protects their mind from manipulation. The truth. Knowledge, once possessed within the mind, will make plain the most complex of illusions, will uproot the most well-entrenched deceptions, will dissolve the most well-crafted lie. All propaganda campaigns have one thing in common. They all distort and deceive by providing an easy-to-accept version of reality that is ultimately false in relation to the whole truth. Therefore, if we always strive to understand our reality personally, then we will shore up our minds against attempts to manipulate it. All the best propaganda only ever offers us a false version of reality. In order for it to work, we must accept this as our truth. But if we question it, if we investigate the inner workings of it and seek to validate its veracity, then we will recognize it for what it is. So again, that's from the post, Propaganda, Do You Know You're Soaking in It?, which is contained within the linked section of this radio show you're listening to. And I just want to mention that I try to make an effort almost on every blog post to provide a context of understanding so that it can be empowering information. And I really wanted the general theme of knowledge is pretty much in everything. If you read our About section, that's essentially what the meta message, to use a friend of our, Paul Conan's vernacular. A meta message is the message behind the message. It's the meaning of the parable. It's the reason why we do something on all of the various posts. And the meta message for our blog is essentially that we need to share knowledge with everybody. It's our moral duty. And I'd argue that the knowledge that we receive is not ours, meaning that we have the right to keep it hidden. In fact, we receive the information as embodiments of the Creator with a specific and unique purpose. And this general purpose is to distribute information as far and as wide as humanly possible. And this is our duty as spiritual beings in the universe of spirit, to share information with everybody, regardless of our own personal needs. And I know I'm going to rub people the wrong way when I say that, because there's a lot of people who are heavily invested in intellectual property schemes so that they can do the work. And again, I don't judge you if that's what you're doing. I think that the fact that you found a way to continue to do the work is admirable. And the more you can find a way to distribute information that is very important, then the better we are all going to be. Because eventually we're going to get to a point on this planet where information sharing is going to be just commonplace. And really working together as a community is the tool that we can use to move beyond this age of information hoarding. And I'll just end this long rant by saying it has been my dream ever since we started the blog to have a blogger community support network. Part of what Julian and I do on a daily basis is to go to as many blogs as we can that have added value to our lives and provided content for Stillness, to click on their ads, to share their information, to let them know that their work is having value. And what that does is it provides them with energy. So if you don't have money to donate to people's websites, oftentimes the advertisements on these blogs go directly to the people who are running them. So you can usually click once or twice a day on a blog that you find of value, and this will literally contribute energy, monetary value, or the currency, debt instruments to the person who runs the blog. Okay, and with that being said, before you continue on, Julian, I'm just going to go ahead. It's the time to open up the lines for callers. So if anybody's listening and they want to call in and join in the conversation, there's no taboo topics. The call-in line for the show is... sorry, I seem to have lost...
646
Thank you.
478 3085, and you need to push 1. That's 646 478 3085, and then press 1 so that we can see that you're in the queue. Otherwise, we're going to keep on going until we see that anybody has shown up in the queue. So to go on about money, as I was looking at some information for today's show, I'm looking through our blog posts for the previous 2 weeks to see what we were going to talk about today. Mike in the Stillness in the Storm newsroom, which is a Facebook group where we also share information, and you can share information with us. And this is where I got this from today. So, since today's show has been talking about money and how it's used and propaganda and all this, this is from Osho and what he had to say on money. Don't be too much concerned about money, because that is the greatest distraction against happiness. And the irony of ironies is that people think they will be happy when they have money. Money has nothing to do with happiness. If you are happy and you have money, you can use it for happiness. I'm not against money, remember. Don't misinterpret me. I am not against money. I am not against anything. Money is a means. If you are happy and you have money, you will become more happy. If you are unhappy and you have money, you will become more unhappy, because what will you do with your money? Your money will enhance your pattern, whatsoever it is. If you are miserable and you have power, what will you do with your power? You will poison yourself more with your power. You will become more miserable.
There it is. Yeah, that perfectly describes it.
And that's kind of like the spiritual aspect to money and the truth behind money.
Right.
Because it's not actually as real as we make it out to be.
Right.
And then I just wanted to briefly maybe talk or discuss or just mention the breakdown that Mark Passio did for the word excuse me for the word money, or mon being one, like a monopod, for instance, and then I as in your left and right eye, but also more specifically your third eye, which is your pineal glands centered in your skull.
Right. And Mark has a wonderful breakdown. There's actually a podcast in his series on whatonearthishappening.com where he goes over money and he describes a lot of the reasons why they use the occult symbolism in the way they do.
Yep.
And essentially what they're getting at, the reason they use the word money in this comes from what Mark calls green language, which is the ability to interpret language for its hidden meanings using phonetic interpretation. Well, mon eye, or money, as Julian just mentioned, is the one eye. And the one eye is also synonymous with the third eye, or the pineal gland, or the gateway, or the seat of the soul, or the stargate within our brain.
The coming together of the two hemispheres.
Right, the two
The
becoming
left and
one.
the right, the masculine and the feminine becoming one.
Right, true knowledge, wisdom, awakened consciousness. So often, I say it as a joke, but I'm not really joking. I'm dead serious when I say this. We'll be talking about what Julian and I do for a living in various circles, and they say, what do you do for money? And we'll say, well, I don't make the fake stuff like you guys do. I make real money.
Right.
One eye.
Right.
Unity consciousness. So what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that we're actively seeking the truth. We're developing knowledge within ourselves, and we're making an effort to share that with others, which in turn feeds back on us because now we have a better understanding of the truth, and we're all enriched as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Because truth seeking is really a group effort. That's why we have that little tagline on our blog. So what I was just going to get into with the money aspect for what Mark shares is that our would-be masters, or the partners in contrast, the Cabal, they use this symbolism for many reasons. One of the best reasons is because these are archetypes, or aspects of the unconscious that are given form in symbolic depiction. And it's very important for the Cabal to use symbols that can be used to divine deeper meanings. So essentially what I'm getting at is a very simple principle. Let's imagine that you were born and you grew up on this world free from propaganda and manipulation, and you just simply observed and learned. Well, eventually, because of the nature of consciousness, and especially the unconscious mind, you're going to receive a tremendous amount of information into your unconscious. And eventually that information organizes all on its own, using the collective unconscious of the whole of humanity and the planet around archetypal images and information. And what will literally happen is, eventually, you'll start to have realizations about some things that, like what money is, making contact with ancestors, having mystical experiences. I mean, this is all fairly common in cultures that don't grow up under heavy westernized influence, let's say. So the reason that the Cabal use this symbolism is because they need to normalize it. They need to actually put in a false meaning that people will recognize, so that they don't actually divine the deeper meaning. And one of the symbols that they use for this is unity consciousness, or the eye in the triangle over the pyramid. And this symbolizes the great work in alchemy. So that's one of the reasons why they use the symbolism. It's something that you instinctually identify with creation and energy, especially the color green as well. It's a subconscious or archetypal image or symbol that deeply affects consciousness. So that's one of the reasons that they use these symbols on the American dollar, and they use different types of symbols and different styles in using other currencies, but the general framework is almost there in all of them. So, I just wanted to check to see if there's anything else we should be discussing.
Well,
What did you want to mention something?
I just linked, since we did talk about money and Mon-I, I just wanted to give a little tribute to Mark Passio, because we really do value his information and his work greatly. He has, if you've never seen any of his presentations or listened to his podcasts, we highly suggest that you do. And we linked in this blog post, or in the show, the Streetwise Spirituality Seminar. It's 6 hours, but it's well worth it. Well worth it. But I wanted to real quick just, Mark talks a lot about the New Age deception and true awakening. What it really means to be awakened, as opposed to what is being pawned off as truly being awakened. And I wanted to just go over what he says on that. So Mark's 20 factors that define real spiritual awakening as opposed to the New Age view of what awakened consciousness means are: 1. Being awake means knowing about the occult and understanding that there are both light and dark aspects to it. 2. Being awake means knowing that truth is singular, objective, and exists independently of our perceptions of it. Being awake means knowing the true self and understanding its connections to all. Being awake means knowing that neither the physical nor spiritual realities take precedence over each other. It's important to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Being awake means being out of ego identification and ego attachment. Being awake means exercising discernment and judgment. Being awake means being mentally free of all false religions. Being awake means knowing there is no such thing as knowledge, which is negative, quote unquote. Being awake means knowing the causal factors that have led to the current human condition. Being awake means understanding and living in harmony with natural law. Being awake means knowing and living both pillars of enlightenment. Being awake means knowing that authority is an illegitimate illusion and that all government is slavery. Being awake means recognizing the critical importance of free will and personal responsibility. They go hand in hand. Being awake means knowing that the so-called negative emotions serve a critically important purpose. Not that they're to be walked away from, but that they serve a critical, important purpose. Being awake means knowing that true enlightenment is not about pursuing bliss in a world that is currently filled with suffering. Being awake means knowing what true forgiveness really means. Being awake means knowing the difference between what cannot be changed and what should be changed. Being awake means caring enough to take real-world action to create real-world change. Being awake means knowing that true enlightenment is not only about improving yourself, but also about influencing others to improve themselves. And lastly, being awake means knowing that true enlightenment does not equate to perfection.
Right. Great points there. Yeah, there's a lot to consider if you're just becoming familiar with Mark. His presentation style can be rather aggressive, but the quality of the information presented is very high. What makes something true or not is not who is saying it, what kind of haircut they have, whether they're loud when they talk, what their personal beliefs about various things are. What makes something true is what is actually being said, the logical framework of the statement. So
So even if you don't like Mark in his presentation style or agree with all his beliefs, you can make a personal judgment about the quality of it, the veracity of his information, by analyzing what is actually being said, judging it on its merits alone. And, okay, we've got about 18 minutes left. I'll just give the call-in number again, which is 646-478-3085. And if you'd like to speak to us, just press 1. And I'll also just let anybody know, if you ever have a question that you don't want to call in for, you can always send us an email at sitsshow @gmail.com.
I just want to make sure that we're clear on the email address. It's sitsshow@gmail.com, which is spelled out sitsshow@gmail.com.
Okay, good. All right, well, we've got about 15 minutes left here. Looks like the last item.
Well, we had 11 red flag events that just happened as we entered the pivotal month of August 2015. And then we also had a whole other section where we wanted to talk a little bit about cosmic disclosure of Corey Good and David Wilcock. Briefly reviewing the last 2 episodes, maybe talk a little bit about the black goo. So, what would you like to do? You want to go over the 11 red flags, or do you want to go over the cosmic disclosure in the next 10 minutes or so?
Let's go ahead and I'll just mention the 11 red flags post that's towards the bottom is a great post that lists some of the financial happenings that have occurred, and there's a lot of ways to gain gleans and insight into what's happening in the world by following the financial markets. And it can be rather difficult because there's so many gurus and self-proclaimed masters that can predict events.
Right.
So you always got somebody who's saying this in 1 month, the collapse is coming, in 1 year, in 10 years. I mean, the predictions range. But if you can separate the predictions from the actual hard data points, you can put the hard data on the table yourself, and you can begin to enhance your own discernment process. We've been doing this for about 4 years now, and I mean, I'm not a master by any means, but I can usually read the writing on the wall when you look at some of these events. And right now, what's happening in the global economy is we've got the preparation for a major transition of wealth, which happens about every 70 years or so. Something happens in the financial system where one group is able to aggregate wealth away from another, usually using manipulation techniques. The stock market crash was one example. Gold-backed currencies is an example reaching back far into history. There's been a huge number of wealth transfers, taking wealth out of the middle class and out of the vast majority of the population and aggregating it into the hands of a small elite using gold-based money systems. So if you're here thinking of that gold transition to asset-backed money will solve all of our problems, you may have some more research to do. And the Money Masters is a great video for that. By the way, I did update the Money Masters posts while we were on the air, so there's a video in there now you can view. I'm going to jump right into the next topic of discussion, which is the cosmic disclosure with Corey Good and David Wilcock. Now, I'll just remind everybody, we did recently make arrangements to start doing analysis and summaries of the show. Corey and David had mentioned in the past that they were going to ensure that any content that was released on Gaiam TV was freely available elsewhere in some other form, so that people didn't feel like they had to pay Gaiam TV to receive the information. So, in keeping in line with trying to be honorable and notify others of our intentions, I decided to reach out to Gaiam and Corey and ensure that they knew what we were intending to do, and they said that was perfectly fine. So we should have the first summary of episode 7, which is an extensive one, either coming out later today or tomorrow. There's been a lot of information
covered in the Cosmic Disclosure series. Much of it has already been discussed on Corey's website, which is spherebeingalliance.com.
It's sphere being.
Yeah, sphere.
It sounded like you said fear being.
Oh, no. Sphere, yes. SPHERE beingalliance.com.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff that they've been talking about thus far has already been revealed there. So there's really nothing hugely new, other than a few details. I would say if you do have the opportunity to get Gaiam TV, I'm really not trying to promote it as some amazing station, but if you do have the finances, there is some value to actually watching these two discuss the events. I'm pretty intuitive, and I observe human behavior, and I got a lot more intuitive data watching them speak versus just reading something.
Not only that, but you also get access to to all of the shows on Gaiam, not just Cosmic Disclosure when you sign up. So
Right, yeah.
you get a lot with the sign up. And you will be supporting Gaiam and Corey and ourselves if you do sign up through our link, or if you call Gaiam and have them switch it over so that it supports us or Corey or whomever. That'll also help. And just so I can give my 2 cents and my opinion on the Cosmic Disclosure with Corey Good and David Wilcock, I'm much more a skeptical person, I guess.
What do you mean by that?
I need more. How can I say this? When we're talking about something grand, as what Corey and David are talking about, for as long as, for instance, not Corey but David has been talking about it, for 5, 6, 7 years, because a lot of the information that David talked about previously in regards to our relation to 2012 is now being transitioned over to this huge galactic wave awakening. So, as we said earlier in the show, there seems to be patterns that do get played out on mass consciousness. Not to say that somebody's being deceptive or that they're intentionally trying to create chaos, but it does so seem that there's a pattern that happens with the seasons of the year, with information that comes out during those times. And if you look at winter being death, spring being coming to life, summer being living their life out, and et cetera, you can look at how that information somewhat correlates with those seasons as well.
Okay. So you're skeptical because he has made predictions in the past that didn't come to fruition, and now you don't want to just accept what he's saying on blind faith.
I suppose. I mean, I don't. Can you say it one more time?
That he made predictions in the past that did not come to fruition, and you don't want to accept what he says on blind faith.
Without evidence, it's more accurate.
Okay, without evidence.
So yeah, I would say that.
Right, and that statement is true for anything.
For anything?
Anything, absolutely.
You mean in relation to you?
In relation to anything. If somebody makes a statement of truth, well, how do you know whether or not that statement is true? If I tell you to go look outside because it's raining, well, it may not be raining in your part of the world. So does that mean what I just said is untrue?
It depends on the context, the relativity of what we're talking about.
Right. So what I'm really trying to get at is, and I hear this all the time, so I just want to put a really fine point on this. There's so many people that will take one mistake out of somebody's life work, and based on that one mistake, try to dismiss anything that person has ever said and will ever say, as if it's completely untrue. In relation to David Wilcock, I mean, there's a million haters out there that think because he tries to sell books, because he's on Gaiam TV, that he's just trying to make money, that everything he says is untrue, it's lies, it's disinformation, he's just trying to bait us on another hook.
Are you saying that that's what I'm saying?
I'm not-
It sounds
no.
like you're directing that whole energy of what you just said over to me, and that's not what I'm saying.
Great. That's not what I'm trying to say that you're saying. But what I am saying is that there are people who do think that way.
Mm-hmm.
And people in general can be tempted to think that way. Because, let's face it, we're not omniscient. We don't have access to all information at any time, at any point in history. So all we can do is what we can based on what we have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have a lot of knowledge behind, if David or if somebody makes a statement that, yes, there's this cosmic energy coming in into the solar system and the Earth that is upstepping DNA, and there's been evolutionary changes that we can document going back to the 70s that have shown that brain sizes has increased by 5%, and he gives you all this information. Well, unless you have done the research yourself to validate what he's saying, all you can do at that point is either accept it or deny it. Or, I'm going to throw a third option out there, you can just put it on your shelf. And this is what I would argue is the best way to process information. There's two ends of the pole. There's blind belief, where you just accept what somebody's saying without actually doing any verification on your own. Then there's blind skepticism, where you deny what somebody's saying without any doing an investigation on your own. And then there's the middle path. And the middle path is about objectivity. And what I mean by objectivity is information gathering. You're not trying to develop an absolute conclusion about whether something is true or not. And this is what a lot of people tend to do, and I'm not lumping you into this category, Julian, but I'm just speaking to a modality of consciousness that operates on the planet right now, which is people want to make a conclusion about something, and then they want to run from that conclusion, or they want to uphold that conclusion as unquestionably true. But since the reality is nobody's possessed of all the facts, nobody has absolute knowledge, whatever conclusion we make at any point in our lives, regardless of how informed we think we are, is only based on whatever knowledge we had available to us at the time. And as a result, as our knowledge increases, so does the capacity to make better, more accurate conclusions. So what does this mean in relation to David Wilcock?
Including whether or not you listen to what a certain individual has to say.
Exactly. Right, so that's the whole point. We're talking about David. And we're talking about Corey Good, and there's been a lot of buzz recently about, well, who are these guys? We don't have any proof to back up what Corey Good has been saying. And he may be associated with the MELAB program, and this other guy says that the MELAB program's filled with mind control operatives, so he must be mind controlled along with David, and they're just trying to scam us, and it's all just a big scam. And that's kind of the topic of discussion that's being thrown around right now. We're swinging from one end of the pole to the other. And this is what ends up happening. You got a lot of people that just, anything Corey says, I don't exactly know how many people do this, but I'm going to say, I hazard to guess it's a majority of the population. A lot of people will hear what Corey says because it feels good. The story, what they're telling, he's saying, feels good. They want it to be true. So they believe it to be true. So they accept it without investigation. On the other end of the coin, the spectrum, you got people who are very skeptical. Or more to the point, a better word for it is close-minded. Because a skeptic is somebody that actually investigates everything to the nth degree and then makes a conclusion, and then always leaves their mind open. That's what a classical definition of a skeptic actually is.
Which is why I said that I was skeptical.
Right. So, my point is that you got a lot of people on either end of the spectrum. And what's the common element there? Whether you've got blind belief or you got blind skepticism. What's the common element? We've been talking about it all throughout the show. It's ignorance. Either way, you got a situation where people don't have all the facts, and they want to put the cart before the horse and say, well, this is either true or this isn't. And what ends up happening is we get stuck in our beliefs or our conclusions to the point where we can't change. We feel like our integrity is compromised if we admit something. If we admit that we were wrong, or that we might have been wrong, or that we may now have information that changes our beliefs. So I'm sorry I kind of got off on a huge tangent, and we don't really have any time to talk about what I wanted to talk about in this section. But a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, that we covered in this little blurb here, we spoke about last week, and we usually discuss in updates about Corey. The
All I wanted to say, if I may, because sorry that you feel upset that I want to speak, but what I wanted to say was that
I don't feel as
I
if you want
don't
to speak.
blindly believe or accept what any of these people are saying, and grand claims do require grand evidence, and that's it, really.
Cool.
And until then, we're gonna look. For me, I'm gonna keep looking, keep reading, seeing what happens, seeing if things correlate, seeing if more physical/material things pop into existence that correlate with that, and hopefully the people who read our blog are kind of in line with that and helping themselves
90 seconds.
and ourselves to further that
Right.
endeavor.
And, I mean, it's probably obvious that Julian and I don't agree on everything. There's a lot of things that we don't necessarily agree on, but we're usually open to discussing them. And I really feel like this is the common thread, is that we are going to have different points of view. We are going to have different conclusions, which we could call beliefs. And it's okay. As a matter of fact, it's almost a good thing that we do have this, because now we can gain from our experience. But we can't do that if we remain closed and locked away inside of ourselves and never want to share our experience, our perspectives, because we feel like we may be wrong. Coming down to the last 30 seconds, I want to thank everybody who's listened to the show. Again, our next show is August 26th, 2015, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Thank you to Galactic U and Sierra Neblina for allowing us to host this show. You can read more of our content on stillnessinthestorm.com. You can also find all of our social sites on that page as well. And I just want to thank everybody for contributing their valuable energy to our efforts. We couldn't do this without you. Julian?
Just to be clear, you can find our social sites under the SITS social media page on stillnessinthestorm.com.